A quiet farmer named Daniel lived on land his family had owned for over a century, acres of fertile valley and forest that stretched into the hills, with one feature that had always been both a responsibility and a gift. An old but strong dam that his grandfather and father had maintained to control the flow of the river that cut through the valley, a dam that supplied water to local farms and protected the lowlands from flooding. And though many saw it as just a relic of old engineering, Daniel knew it was the backbone of the valley's survival, and as caretaker, he held legal rights not only to the land but to the water rights that came with it, something most people underestimated, until the day an HOA from the nearby growing town decided that his land would make the perfect expansion site for their development of luxury homes. They came to him with contracts, fake smiles, and lowball offers, expecting him to give up what generations had worked for. But Daniel refused firmly, telling them his land wasn't for sale at any price, that it wasn't about money but about legacy and respect. Yet the HOA, arrogant and emboldened by their connections and wealth, dismissed him as just an old farmer clinging to dirt, and so they did the unthinkable. They began construction anyway, clearing sections of his property near the valley edge, driving stakes into his soil, pouring foundations on ground that legally belonged to him. And when he protested, they laughed, telling him he could sue if he dared, because their lawyers were sharper, richer, and had friends in high offices, mocking his old pickup truck, his simple clothes, and his solitary way of life, believing him powerless to fight back against their machinery of greed. Daniel tried the lawful route, filing complaints, showing his deed, even contacting county officials, but each time he was stonewalled by bureaucracy, red tape, or outright corruption, the HOA's influence stretching farther than he realized, and with each denial, each letter of rejection, his frustration grew, though he kept his composure, masking his rising fury beneath calm eyes, all the while working his farm and tending the dam, never letting on that he was carefully watching the 35 homes take shape like parasites on his land, their streets paved, their signs painted, their sales offices boasting exclusive living, while ignoring that they stood on stolen ground. The townspeople whispered, some sympathetic, others dismissive, and even his closest neighbors told him to give up, that the HOA was too strong, that he couldn't stop progress. But Daniel was not a man to surrender, for beneath his calm demeanor ran the blood of generations who had endured storms, wars, and droughts, and he knew that while men might twist laws, they could not twist nature, for he held something more powerful than money or influence. He held the water, the dam above the valley, towering and patient, storing the river's strength like a sleeping giant, had always been kept in balance by his careful hand, and though he never once thought to use it as a weapon, the injustice burned so deeply that his mind began to entertain the thought, the image of those 35 homes sitting smugly on his soil, their developers celebrating with champagne, their board members congratulating each other on outmaneuvering a simple farmer, never realizing that the simple farmer was also the one man who could decide whether their foundations stood or sank. Daniel didn't act in haste. No, he studied every angle, reread his grandfather's journals on the dam, checked the flow charts, calculated the valley's slope, and with precision he knew that opening the gates fully would unleash a surge unstoppable by man, a flood that would carve through the freshly built development like a blade, sparing the town downstream thanks to diversion channels his family had engineered decades earlier, a design unknown to the HOA, for they never bothered to understand the land they stole, thinking in blueprints and profit margins instead of rivers and earth. As weeks passed and the homes neared completion, Daniel endured insults from HOA representatives who came swaggering onto his property, telling him he should be grateful for the improvements they'd brought, that soon he'd be living near millionaires instead of farmers, sneering that he could mow their lawns for a living once his farm inevitably failed, and though his fists itched, he said nothing, only nodded politely, hiding his rage beneath silence, until the day came when he decided it was enough. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky crimson like a warning, Daniel walked the path his father had walked many times, up the ridge to the dam, carrying the heavy keys in his pocket, the ones passed down through generations, the iron cold against his palm, a symbol of authority no court could strip away, and he stood before the great gates of steel and concrete, listening to the roar of water straining behind them, feeling its raw energy vibrating the ground, a beast begging to be unleashed. And he thought of his grandfather's words. This water can give life, but it can also take it. Respect it, and it will respect you. And for the first time, Daniel chose the latter. not out of disrespect but as justice, because the land had been violated, his family name spat upon, and the law had failed him, so it was the land itself that would answer. With steady hands, he turned the wheel, the ancient gears grinding, the gate trembling, and slowly, then suddenly, the flood burst forth, a torrent of white foam and roaring current that thundered down the valley, ripping through soil, sweeping aside barriers, and within minutes, the smug streets of the New HOA neighborhood were rivers, their pristine sidewalks gone, their brand new houses cracking, shattering, collapsing under the unstoppable force, and from the ridge Daniel watched, not with glee but with grim satisfaction, as nature reclaimed what was hers, the water carrying away arrogance, money, and theft in its waves, the homeowners screaming, the developers panicking, their empire dissolving in a single night, all because they underestimated the quiet farmer who held the dam. When the flood subsided, nothing remained but ruins and mud, the 35 homes reduced to wreckage, and the HOA, once so confident, found themselves ruined, their money tied up in lawsuits, their reputation destroyed when the county investigation proved Daniel's deed was valid, that the land was his all along, and though they tried to blame him, the law could not touch him, for the dam was his, the water was his, and every warning he had given them had been ignored, documented, and filed, showing the HOA's willful arrogance. So in the end, it was not Daniel who stood trial but the HOA, bankrupt, humiliated, and erased, while Daniel remained, the farmer with his land restored, his dam intact, and his legacy secure, having taught the world a lesson no court could deliver. You cannot steal from the earth without consequence, for the earth always remembers, and when it decides to strike back, it does so with a force that no man, no lawyer, no law can withstand.